Hello everyone, welcome to the Alias 2021 virtual launch event. My name is Phil Botley and I'm the Alias product manager. In the next 30 minutes we'll look at some of the highlights of this release, which promises to be one of the most significant and biggest releases of Alias for a long time. I hope you enjoy what you see. Let's get started. This year's a really big year for us. It is the 35th birthday of Alias. First shown at SIGGRAPH 85 as Alias 1, used in such films as The Abyss and Terminator 2, and what was the product called Power Animator. And we're also, keeping that technology leadership going with the inclusion of advanced tools such as Create VR in Alias, which we released last year, and more on that later on. Given that it's our birthday, when we come in to see you, if we see you this year, then we'll be handing out some swag such as cups and hoodies and pens and everything. We'll look at how to get some swag to you if we can't do that, but stay tuned. Hopefully there's some really slick 35-year-old Alias swag to hand out. Let's look at really what we have in this release, and we have a whole raft of new features and enhancements, some of which are really groundbreaking for Alias. One of these is our history visualizer, and this is really our node-based approach to history, so we can actually look at replacing the input nodes and then having the geometry rebuild automatically in our dependency graph, which is a new way of looking and interacting and visualizing history in Alias. We have our Alias assembly module concept, so we can now work at a master Alias assembly concept and have Alias files beneath it, all from our reference manager, so we can work collaboratively. For example, a 12-man Alias team can work on one model now. We have enhancements to our UI around Subdivision workflows and also splash screens, and more on that later on also, as well as a raft of training material that we've released with 2021 around Subdivision, Dynamo, and a new set of Dynamo scripts for us to create grills and other components. We've also enhanced surfacing with the whole slew of surfacing enhancements, fillet, retopo, dynamic manipulator, etc. We'll look at those also. And of course, aspects of the physical side with the beginnings of work we're doing in and around clay, surface refit, etc. Our main themes really for 2021 are around collaboration, empowering teams to work together, not just Alias teams, but heterogeneous CAD teams also, so we can begin to work in a master model concept, and also the ability to replace, reuse and share big aspects of Alias data from our history visualizer and begin to actually reuse it amongst wider design teams. We also begin to dip our toe into the world of automation. Some of our tools are kind of semi-automated, but we're now getting to an approach where we can begin to implement automation into Alias to allow us to really take the pain out of these procedural workflows. Alias does the heavy lifting and give us more time to design and refine our Alias geometry. So let's look at one of these enhancements, and this is really our history engine enhancements in Alias, what we call history visualizer. As we know, Alias has a window called History View, which gives us a serial view of our Alias history. So we can see the surfaces, we can see the input geometry, and we can see how they are connected. When people have asked, could we actually somehow see a more intuitive flow of the geometry to see how they are connected, how they're grouped, and if possible, could we replace the original input node with another input node for curve or surface and have that geometry rebuild itself automatically. Normally, or currently in Alias, I have to rebuild it manually, but that would be really quite cool if we could do that. And one example that we have this, we can see our history visualizer window at the bottom of the screen. We have a couple of bi-rails and draft surfaces at the top. You can see I can highlight and can select it in the modeling window. And I'm going to go down and I'm just going to select the curve I want to replace and then replace it with my new curve, and the geometry rebuilt. So I'm just replacing CATIA curve 2 or 1 with the CATIA curve also, and the geometry rebuilds. Critically, all the geometry remains intact. The bi-rails and the drafts rebuild automatically, and I can see that my nodes are updated also in the window. So very simply, select and replace allows me to rebuild the geometry. Of course, this doesn't need to just be used on engineering data. This could be any sort of data that I'm building, bi-rail, square, fillets, any tool that has history in Alias works this way. the array tool, for instance. I can now replace my input entities. For example, a circle, change it to a hexagon, and my array geometry will rebuild automatically if I've drafted and filleted around that. All that geometry will rebuild also. So very simply, replace the input, and then everything rebuilds automatically. This is really, as we said before, a node-based approach to modeling, or our take on a node-based approach to modeling. Our design team have been working very closely with the Maya design team to get some learnings from Bifrost, such as colors and intuitive interaction paradigms. So we have some learnings there which have applied to Alias. We also have more work coming later in the year where we take this a stage further and allow the ability to create feature libraries, to drop and drag components into our window and into our model, and to really build up a library set of these features so we can actually begin to explore and share this geometry amongst the design teams. One of the other significant changes or enhancements to Alias in 2021 is building upon what we have done in Reference Manager over the past year. Those of you who have been following it will know that we've made significant enhancements to Reference Manager for workflow reasons, such as batch conversion, central file for storing all ref files, intelligent searching. So if I have a ref file that's already been created, I don't have Alias doesn't translate it again. It goes, it finds the file, then uses that file. And also, quite critically, the implementation of seeing when files are up to date or out of date and who's working on them. So we can see that if I need to update an out of date file, Alias tells me it's out of date, and I can just reload it automatically, and the geometry will actually reload. So in 2021, what we've done is we've actually built upon this, and we've actually created what we call Alias assemblies. And in a nutshell, this is essentially the concept of a Alias product, Alias part, and Alias assembly model. So we have a master product at the top, and beneath it we can hang parts, assemblies. Doesn't have to be Alias assemblies or Alias parts. It could be CATIA, it could be NX, it could be STL, it could be anything. What we've also implemented is the ability to see who's working on that geometry and when it was last saved. So I can just hover over my reference manager, I can actually see it, and I can see who's been working on it. Inside the Reference Manager, we've also enhanced simple, intuitive workflows to allow us to work in this assembly mode, such as symmetry. So now from my session, I can actually have symmetry or symmetrical components on there. In this case, it's a wheel, which I loaded in a moment. So you can see I'll just insert a model into my assembly, and I'll just load this tire set in. The geometry is loaded, and I can actually just have both separate symmetries, and then save this as my Alias assembly. So I'm building up an master assembly model all the time, and I can add to it, or my team colleagues or my teammates can add to it also. Okay, that's good. We understand how that works. But what if I really want to focus in on the light can? What if I want to effectively propagate that and work on that in its own session? I can then, or what I can do now, is I can select a component from my Reference Manager session. I can then actually open in a new stage set, and then Alias will open that in a stage set still inside my Alias assembly, so still inside my master assembly model concept, but now I'm working on an individual component. I can add geometry, change geometry, build geometry, but then save that back into my assembly concept. Barry will have more on this in the deep dives. Quite a long session on this, so I'd suggest that you watch those, and I'll encourage you to watch those, as it'll give you some really great details on what you've implemented and how it can work. As well as the enhancements to assemblies and visualizer, we've also enhanced our subdivision tools. And one of the great new tools in 2021 is our retopo tool. For those of you familiar with QuadDraw in Maya, this is essentially our implementation of QuadDraw, which is the ability to paint onto scan or NURB surface a subdivision mesh. So I can just paint very quickly, dib, dab, 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 draw the geometry all over the shape and quickly explore the shape and build my geometry very intuitively. We talk about automation, and what we've done here, we've kind of amalgamated 12 tools into this retopo tool, which allows us to build the geometry very easily. But critically, it also has history as well. So it's a history supported entity. So I can go back and revisit it at any time. I can activate history. Obviously, for our history visualizer, any underlying geometry that changes could be updated automatically also. So a very slick and very neat way to quickly model concepts on scan data by just drawing subdivision geometry on any complicated shape very easily, very quickly. As well as some quite substantial enhancements, we've done some subtle changes or some subtle enhancements to the Subd tools. And one of them is really taking our universal manipulator tool and really making it usable, not just at the global level, but also at the component level, which means I can actually obviously pull or move shapes in X, Y, and Z space, but I can also now move components such as CVs, hulls, edges, groups of CVs. So I can actually then snap my manipulator to it and pull the CVs. Here we can see we're actually moving it in the planes, the ZX plane or the YX plane or whatever plane we want. We just select the square in the manipulator. But what I can also do now is I can actually select individual control vertices or hulls, snap the manipulator to do that and pull those. I can, of course, group those as separate CVs, and I can actually snap the manipulator to the central point. This tool also comes into its own with the introduction of selection sets in 2021. Those of you who perhaps have been using Alias for as long as I have will remember clusters and jacks from the Power Animator tool, which allows you to select the CVs over multiple surfaces, create a selection set, and then actually select that selection set at any time in the future, so you can actually pull CVs over multiple surfaces. We've implemented this in 2021, so I can group a series of CVs on Subds or even on NURBS, save them as a selection set, access them from my object lister, and then snap the manipulator to it so I can pull them. Now, this could be something as simple as a wheel arch over maybe 20 different patches, group the CVs around the wheel arch, then I can actually just then pull the wheel arch out and essentially group those maybe 100 CVs over 20 patches, Subdivision or NURBS, and then actually pull them in one entity, one operation. So a very neat way of actually defining deformer modules and deformation sets to actually pull and shape the geometry. As we mentioned before, we're looking at enhancing the UI and making the UI more discoverable for a variety of different users. One of these projects really is around subdivision. So in the splash screen, we have a new subdivision menu, which we can launch straight from the splash screen, which takes us straight into subdivision modeling mode in Alias. That also kicks in a whole set of marking menus. Those of you who may recall in last year, in 2019, we implemented customizable marking menus, so I can define custom sets of marking menus very easily. We're now taking that a stage further, so I can flick between marking menus in modeling modes. So if I'm in subdivision and I press a control key or a hotkey, I can move into NURBS and vice versa. And so not only will my menus change, my marking menus will now change. So a very neat way to do that, but also part of our approach to make the Alias UI more discoverable, to allow users to retain knowledge for longer, and also encourage infrequent users who may want to visit and use Alias maybe for, half an hour a day. So we're not kind of confused by Alias. Alias helps us, and the UI is more discoverable. Again, we'll see more on this in the coming 12 months. And we have a really big push from our design department and UI department to bring this to you moving forward. As we mentioned earlier, we've released a raft of collateral with 2021. Here we have our Subd training collateral in collaboration with our partners at Linkage Design. And this is really around subdivision training. So we can look at building a wing mirror, for instance, a car component, and how we work in a hybrid approach with Alias, as well as a car exterior, how we can build a particular car, and some tips and tricks for building that geometry. Again, focusing on the hybrid approach of Alias, Subd, and NURBS, but also bang up to date using some of the new Alias 2021 tools and how you can get the best from these tools and be as productive as quickly as possible with them. Those of you will recall that we implemented Dynamo maybe 2 years ago, computational design, and we're enhancing it on a yearly basis. And we have quite a number of enhancements planned for this year. One of the scripts we've been working on is really a morphing script, which allows us to take a shape A and shape B, and then using a simple slider and dynamo, morph between these shapes to get a nice design that we may want. And once we're happy with that design, we can freeze it and we can go and explore that design and then take that design in all sorts of directions. And here we can see we have the slider moving and the shape moving from left to right. We've been working with a number of our customers on a variety of projects here. Obviously, we can talk about this project and we can share this script with you, but some really exciting ways to not just distort shapes and explore shapes in one dimension here, but we're exploring shapes in 3 dimensions, in a cube, in X, Y, and Z, and we have literally hundreds of shapes to get some really intricate patterns and evolution of patterns and shape forming. So a really nice script that we ship with 2021. We've also implemented the ability to drop and drag Dynamo scripts to our shelves. So we could create a shelf called Dynamo scripts in Alias 2021, and then we could drop that deformer script or that morphing script that you saw before. We could drop our wheel scripts or any scripts that our design colleagues or computational design colleagues have created, and then we can access them from the shelf without having to actually, worry about having to navigate or do all complicated things. Alias will open them for us automatically. We also ship an enhancement for our parametric design card design tool that we shipped last year, which is actually managed from inside of Alias. So we have the ability to control the wheelbase, the rad of the wheel arch from curves inside of Alias. So we can actually distort and play with the curves, and the geometry will rebuild in real time and very quickly also. As we mentioned before, we're shipping a lot of collateral training collateral with 2021, and we have decided this year to focus on interior design and around Subdivision and using Dynamo, computational design and Subdivision together in Alias and Dynamo. So we ship around half a dozen tutorials about creating patterns for IPs and door pockets, Subdivision in Alias and Dynamo, and allowing us to create these intricate patterns around sort of bounded surfaces, creating different forms, orthogonal patterns, hexagonal patterns, etc., 3-dimensional patterns. And again, these scripts or these training exercises are downloadable from our Dynamo help menu in Alias, but also from our AKN resource, Autodesk Knowledge Network resource, where you can access the training videos as well as the wire files and the Dynamo scripts for you to use. As well as the training collateral, we also ship a new set of scripts. An example of which you see here is around a front grille of a car. The script allows us to create some very complicated patterns, not just alternate shapes, but fade out sizes, depths, and other components. So quite a complicated pattern script we've created, grille script. And again, you can download these and play with these and actually customize them and use them in your day-to-day work. In Alias 2020.2, we shipped Create VR, which is our immersive virtual reality sketching tool in Alias, on a single unified pipeline. So we don't have to leave Alias. It's Alias data in and out of Alias, so we don't have to worry about getting the data in and out of Alias or using standalone tools. And we have done a series of enhancements for this in 2021. For those of you who may not have tried it, this is essentially Alias in virtual reality. It's the same tools, the same approach, but it has a virtual reality spin on it. There are things that we can do in VR when we're modeling that we can't do on a flat screen, and we've kind of taken those paradigms and used them to allow designers to create bimanual interaction, i.e. using 2 hands to create and pull and distort the geometry, but at the same time, critically, the Alias cast modeler could be working on his or her screen at the same time with the geometry. So we can really work together and really hand off that data, quick form and theme exploration, get the proportions right, and then bang, we can get it into Alias and actually refine the geometry. The 2 teams working together. And this video shows what we're doing here, where we can actually build the geometry. Again, we shipped this with 2020.2. A few enhancements with 2021, but I'd encourage you to actually go and revisit this and really explore some of the workflows you can have by really working on the same pipeline in the same environment and really getting the best out of Alias from an immersive creation perspective. So as well as these enhancements to, assemblies, assembly modeling, history visualizer in terms of curve and surface replace workflow, Subd enhancements, and of course, immersive virtual reality sketching, we're also enhancing what is our bread and butter, which is surfacing. So we have a heck of a lot of surfacing enhancements, crown, proportional crown on tools, etc., etc. Barry and Uwe and Hill will go through these in the deep dive sessions. But I want to just really highlight one enhancement, which is an enhancement to our fillet tool, where we've implemented G2 curvature and arc as an option both on our curve and our surface fillet, which really allows us to control not only the curvature comb up to the peak of the fillet, but control the peak of the fillet itself by having control of the control points around there. And what this allows us to do, it really allows us to control the highlight to get a nice blended and faded and smoother highlight. And we can see the old pull down option from the fillet menu here, and we can see we get a much subtler and nicer highlight, ideal for plastic and metal parts, but also for those kind of interesting interior components that we want to begin to work on as we spend a lot more time on interiors and aspects, maybe to get softer highlights and nicer highlights. This could help in that workflow. So I'd welcome you to check that out in a new release. So a quick summary of what we have in 2021. We have some significant enhancements to our history engine, our history visualizer, our dependency-based approach and view of history, how we can actually connect nodes and using a curve and surface replace workflow. We have our Alias assemblies, which allows us to work at a master Alias assembly model, but beneath that actually hold or have Alias models, WREF models, CAP parts, products, everything together, but critically saved as an Alias file, so we can work together, for example, a team of 12 Alias people working in this way, always up to date on the same geometry. We have enhancements to our UI, making it easier to get into our subdivision workflows from the splash screen without having to navigate around Alias, to flick between customizable menus, subdivision nerves menus, and so we can iterate very quickly between nerves and Subd workflows. And again, as part of our UI project, this is an ongoing exercise which we'll see more of this year. We've shipped a load of training material around Subdivision, Dynamo, as well as new Dynamo scripts. We're beginning to connect aspects of clay, physical, digital, and the virtual side to close that clay gap as quickly as we can, as well as enhancements to our surfacing tools, whether it be aspects of automation, effectively a dozen tools in one tool for retopo, for quick Subd painting on scan or NURBS geometry, or enhancements to our fillet tool to really control the highlights from these areas also. So it really takes us to the main themes of collaboration, Alias teams and non-Alias teams working inside of Alias, replace, reuse and reshare, the beginning of capturing Alias data, beginning to have intelligence in Alias to reuse and share this data amongst our design teams. And of course, automation. We'll see more of this in our direction presentation later on, what we're doing from an automation standpoint, but we're beginning to see the ability to automate procedural workflows so we can spend more time refining, designing and surfacing, and Alias can do some of the heavy lifting on these tools. That was a brief overview of Alias 2021. As I said before, there'll be more of the detail in the deep dives from Barry and the gang. There is a direction presentation about what we're doing in the next 12 months and also research projects we're going on. But for the moment, I hope you enjoyed what you saw, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you.